The knife was already raised, catching the cold, sharp glint of the morning sun, and the only sound in the entire world was the heavy, ragged breathing of an old man who was about to break his own heart to keep a promise to the Almighty. Have you ever wondered what it truly feels like when the God who gave you everything suddenly asks you to give it all back? Have you ever stood at the edge of a mountain, holding the very thing you love most in this world, and felt the crushing weight of a command that defies all human reason? Before we journey up the slopes of Mount Moriah to witness this ultimate test of the soul, I invite you to join our circle of wisdom. If these stories of old nourish your spirit, please like this video, leave a comment with your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel. Your support helps us keep the fire of these ancient words burning bright for all of Africa and the world to see. Now let us settle in, for the wind is rising, and a father's faith is about to be tried by fire. Listen, the story of Abraham does not begin on a mountain. It begins in the dust of a long journey and the quiet ache of an empty tent. For decades, Abraham and his wife Sarah walked the earth with a hole in their lives that no amount of cattle or gold could fill. They were wealthy in things, but poor in the one thing that matters to a man of the soil: a son to carry his name, a branch to extend the family tree into the future. God had promised him a nation, a lineage as numerous as the stars that blanket the Serengeti at midnight. But the years passed like dry seasons. The hair turned white, the skin grew wrinkled like a parched riverbed, and still the laughter of a child was missing from their home. Then, when hope was nothing but a flickering coal on a cold hearth, the miracle happened. Isaac was born. Imagine the joy in that camp. Isaac, his name means laughter. He was the rain after a 100-year drought. He was the green shoot breaking through the hard, sun-baked earth. Abraham loved the boy more than he loved his own breath. He watched him grow, taught him how to track the clouds, how to lead the sheep, and how to honor the Creator. Isaac was the walking, breathing proof that God keeps his word. But then the voice of the Almighty came in the deep stillness of the night, a voice that did not bring comfort, but a command that felt like a spear to the chest. "Take your son," the voice said, "your only son whom you love, Isaac, and go to the region of Moriah. Sacrifice him there as a burnt offering." The world must have gone silent. No birds sang, no wind stirred the acacia trees. How do you process such a word? In our African tradition, a child is not just a person. A child is the future. To lose a child is to see the sun go down at noon. Yet Abraham did not argue. He did not cry out to the neighbors. He did not even tell Sarah, for some burdens are too heavy for two hearts to carry. Early the next morning, while the dew was still silver on the grass, Abraham saddled his donkey. He split the wood for the fire himself, each stroke of the axe echoing the breaking of his own spirit. He took 2 servants and his son, and they began the walk. For 3 days they traveled, 3 days of looking at the back of his son's head, 3 days of hearing Isaac's footsteps behind him. Every step was a battle. Every mile was a mountain in itself. Can you imagine the silence between them? Abraham, a man of great words, now had none left. He was walking toward the death of his legacy, led by the God who had promised him life. On the 3rd day, Abraham looked up and saw the place in the distance. It was a rugged, lonely peak. He turned to his servants and said, "Stay here with the donkey while I and the boy go over there. We will worship, and then we will come back to you." Listen closely to those words. Even in the shadow of the knife, Abraham spoke of returning. He did not know how. He did not know why. But he knew the character of the one who called him. As they climbed, Isaac carried the wood, the very wood that was meant to consume him. Abraham carried the fire and the knife. The climb was steep. The air grew thin. The only sound was the crunch of sandals on stone and the rhythmic clatter of the wood on Isaac's back. Finally, the boy spoke. "Father?" "Yes, my son?" Abraham replied, his voice thick with a grief he could not show. "The fire and wood are here," Isaac said, looking around the barren ridge. "But where is the lamb for the burnt offering?" The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. Abraham looked into the eyes of his miracle, the boy he had waited a century to hold. He took a breath that tasted of dust and faith, and he whispered, "God himself will provide the lamb for the burnt offering, my son." They reached the summit. There, under the vast, uncaring blue of the sky, they built an altar. They laid the stones one by one, a monument of obedience. They arranged the wood, and then the moment of ultimate breaking arrived. Abraham bound Isaac. Now understand this, Isaac was a young man, strong and full of life. Abraham was old, his strength fading like the evening light. Isaac could have run, he could have fought, but the wisdom of the father had passed into the son. Isaac lay down on the wood. He became the sacrifice before the fire was even lit. Abraham reached out. His fingers brushed the cold steel of the knife. He looked at the heavens, perhaps searching for a sign, a reprieve, a reason. But there was only the command. He raised the knife. He steeled his heart. He prepared to do the unthinkable because he believed that the God who can bring life to a dead womb can also bring life back from the ashes of an altar. Abraham! Abraham! The voice tore through the silence like a lion's roar. Here I am, he choked out, the knife trembling in his hand. Do not lay a hand on the boy, the voice said. And oh, the sweetness of those words must have felt like a cool stream in a desert. Do not do anything to him. Now I know that you fear God because you have not withheld from me your son, your only son. Abraham looked up, his eyes blurred with tears of relief, and there, caught in a thicket by its horns, was a ram. Not a lamb, but a ram, strong and ready. God had indeed provided. The blood that was shed that day was not the blood of the promise, but the blood of a substitute. Abraham named that place Yahweh Yireh, the Lord will provide. They descended that mountain not as a grieving father and a dead memory, but as two men who had walked through the fire and come out pure gold. Abraham learned that day that you never truly own what you are unwilling to give back to the Creator. And Isaac learned that the shadow of the Almighty is the safest place to hide, even when the sun is scorching. The wisdom of the mountain. Life lessons from the story. The law of the first fruits. Just as we give the first of our harvest to ensure the blessing of the whole crop, we must be willing to place our most precious things, our dreams, our children, our careers, in God's hands. When you release your grip, God releases His blessing. The silence of preparation. Abraham traveled for 3 days in silence. Great faith is often forged in the quiet times when God seems distant. Do not mistake God's silence for His absence. He is simply watching the road you are walking. Obedience precedes the provision. The ram was not seen until the knife was raised. We often want God to show us the solution before we take the step, but in the kingdom, the ram in the bush only appears when you have reached the top of the mountain. The strength of the youth is in submission. Isaac's willingness to be bound shows us that true power is not in rebellion, but in trusting the wisdom of the elders and the sovereignty of the Creator. A river that stays within its banks brings life. A river that rebels brings destruction. Substitution is the heart of grace. This story reminds us that we all deserve the altar, but the great provider always places a substitute in the thicket. Be grateful for the rams in your life, the second chance